Hello, and welcome back. We're going to cover our last topic related to cell injury, and that's apoptosis. All right. So apoptosis now is programmed cell death, as opposed to necrosis, which is more related to the cell breaking open and spilling its contents. Apoptosis is a clean kind of way to eliminate cells that have either reached their lifespan or have been damaged in some way, okay? There are two pathways that it can be, whereby apoptosis can be triggered. You've got extrinsic and intrinsic, okay? So extrinsic, this signal is coming from outside of the cell. In this case, the proteins that are involved in this are the Fas ligand and receptor, okay? Intrinsic, this is going to be internal to the cell, okay? Typically the trigger on this one is going to be things like DNA damage, reactive oxygen species. Something from inside the cell tells the cell something's not right and it needs to be eliminated, okay? So that extrinsic pathway, essentially what you've got, this is going to be my cell here that's going to die. We've got our Fas receptor on the outside. And what ends up happening is you have the ligand, which I'll draw in pink here, that's going to bind to the receptor, and what that's going to do is that's going to signal a cascade within the cell, and that cascade is going to activate caspases. All right. Now, caspases are a group of protein. For this particular course, I'm not concerned that you know the names of all of the different caspases, but I do want you to know that caspases are what are going to be, first off, an enzyme or a family of enzymes. And what that enzyme does is it breaks apart the cell, okay? So when the Fas ligand binds to the Fas receptor, that's going to initiate a lot of signaling or a lot of activity within the cell, and ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to tell those caspases, you need to start breaking apart the cell. And what's going to happen, our cell is going to change shape here. And I'm going to make it kind of wonky here. You're going to see blebs happen. Now, when a cell is necrotic, a necrotic cell will also exhibit blebbing of the membrane. So it's kind of an outpocketing or ruffling of the membrane because things are activated within the cell. And what will end up happening is you'll get bits and pieces of the cell that are going to break off. And in this case, right, I'm going to draw in green here, this is our DNA. The DNA is going to fragment inside that cell, and you'll get little bits of DNA, as well as things like, organelles that are going to break apart into those little pieces. So essentially what that cell is going to do is it's going to break it down into smaller and smaller pieces, and then what that'll trigger is something like a macrophage, which is a cell that can undergo phagocytosis. And that macrophage is going to digest the bits and pieces. Okay? So it cleans up the bits and pieces. The big difference here between apoptosis and necrosis, we don't have any inflammation that happens here, okay? This is a clean way of disposing of the cell, all right? So the extrinsic is activated by Fas ligand, binds to the Fas receptor, tells those Cas bases they need to degrade. All right. Our intrinsic pathway, all right, is going to have a different mechanism by which the Cas bases are activated. You're still going to have activation of Cas bases, though. Okay. But in the case of the intrinsic pathway, there's a protein called P53. And you're going to hear more about P53 from me when we get to the unit on cancer. But P53 is a transcription factor. All right? And what it normally does within the cell is it kind of keeps things in check. All right? So P53, in this case, again, by a series of steps that I'm not concerned that you know the steps for this particular class, but that P53 then is going to activate our Cas bases, all right? And you're going to see the same effect, whether the cell is triggered to apoptosis extrinsically or intrinsically. You're still going to get the blebbing of the membrane. You're going to get the fragmentation of the DNA, and you're going to get the little pieces that are going to be given off and then taken up by a macrophage, okay? So apoptosis, programmed cell death, means that something within the body tells that particular cell it's no longer viable, all right? Now there can be a number, we went over with this, there can be a number of things related to cell injury. If the cell becomes injured, it can activate the extrinsic pathway via Fas ligand and the receptor. It could also be, if the damage is internal to the organelles, the mitochondria, P53 gets activated, all right? Same result. You're going to get the cell to essentially kind of implode on itself, and the body's going to pick up those pieces, all right? Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions, please let me know.